Welcome back to our show. We've been talking all things Star Wars today, and we are joined by a super awesome guest. Let's introduce them to everybody. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I am Alexander Freed. I work primarily in the video game industry. I was lead writer on Star Wars: The Old Republic. And
I love The Old Republic.
So did I. I spent like 2 years in that game.
You know the difference is I still, you say I did, I do.
If my computer was still alive.
I think he was actually had more to say still.
Sorry.
No, I think that was pretty much the bulk of it. I worked at BioWare for about 7 years. These days I'm freelance. I've also done Star Wars comic books, some Star Wars short stories. I still dabble in Old Republic from time to time.
So, according to the new universe, you're now a fanfic writer.
According to the new universe, I like to think that my work is now legendary, as it's all branded with the Legends line.
Well done, sir. Well done.
That's a good way to put it. But do they really need to kill the prequel universe? I mean, are they going to go back and say, we'll tell us something about a long time ago?
You know, I'm not. Obviously, no one's terribly shocked that they went this route, but
No.
I'm also not, terribly sad to see, these past works being branded this way. The stories are still there. The stories are as good as they ever were. So long as the future content that's coming out is going to meet or exceed that same standard, we're not losing anything. There's still that material to draw from.
Do you know if they're going to continue making it for sale? Because I know a lot of people that adore the expanded universe, and even if it's just available in ebook form, at least it would still be out there instead of having to have a rush on all the used copies that you can get.
That I don't know. Obviously, I hope that it remains available.
They didn't consult you personally?
They did not. I don't know what they were thinking. I'm sure it was some sort of oversight.
It's in your spam email somewhere.
Well, you said you did comic books, and I don't know if we all know this, but because Disney owns Star Wars, also Disney owns Marvel, Dark Horse lost its license. So I hope we actually be able to get your comics. Your comics actually were really good, and stuck to the universe very well.
Well, here's my question, because you did Dark Horse, which is a very different company from Marvel. They're probably way more lenient. Would you want to go work for the powerhouse Marvel, who's going to put a lot of stipulations on you, as opposed to Dark Horse, where you're kind of free because the expanded universe was open?
I'm sure it's going to be a much more sort of focused set of new expanded universe content from now on. But honestly, I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be working with that material as well, and you're going to see a much larger audience than the expanded universe has seen for so many years. Yeah. That opportunity, I think, is worth whatever difficulties that might entail. So if Marvel came calling, I would certainly answer the phone.
Who wouldn't answer the phone, honestly? I mean, if Marvel calls me, I'm definitely answering the phone. So we're going to spend the rest of the show today, because Star Wars has literally impacted everything since it came out, from filmmaking and art and comics, and inspired all sorts of ideas. And
We've had multiple musical guests on.
Yes.
We've actually done Star Wars-inspired orchestras and concerts.
And every time we ask them, what is one of your favorites, it's always the score from Star Wars. Every single one of them. Like, we had a musical show, and we were all high-fiving each other. John Williams, Star Wars, yeah, So what do you think it is that made Star Wars what it was when it came out? And how did it just explode from there?
Well, I think to a large extent there was nothing else like it at the time, at least not visually. You had the sort of quiet, thoughtful science fiction movies.
You didn't have Flash Gordon running around?
I guess not for a couple of years yet, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there was certainly nothing of the sort of big special effects cinematic scale. There was nothing that tried to visualize those sorts of alien worlds and concepts in that same way. You had the literary side of science fiction, and that obviously was tremendous. But Star Wars, there was really nothing to compare it to. You had Star Trek, as the TV show, but in terms of the visuals being presented there, it was nothing on the same level. So just in terms of the gut impact of the film, and then obviously that combined with, the archetypal storytelling, the sense of, I can relate to a big struggle between good and evil. These are simple characters, but they're believable characters, and all of that came together at really the perfect moment for it.
I think that the special effects of the day also really helped make it, because it was right before we really started pushing with digital effects, and digital effects don't necessarily always age that well, whereas Star Wars, you can go back, and for all of my personal issues with it, it is a very watchable movie. Just looking at it on the screen, it is held up beautifully well. And I think that's one of the reasons people were so upset when they wanted to go back and change things by digitizing, was like, no, it's beautiful, leave it alone, because it's just physically lovely to look at.
I think also you said that the world itself looked. I mean, you said Star Trek, but at the same time, Star Trek, your alien was, I'm going to paint half your face black.
Or
like Doctor Who.
Are you hating on my hordas?
Going with old Doctor Who, where it literally was like, I'm putting you with bubble wrap on your face, and it's all like, but Lucas is all like, we need to get deeper.
Lucas had a bigger budget than Doctor Who with the bubble wrap. You got to give him that.
I got to give him true, but I mean, he could have gone the easy route of, you're green, you're purple, you have a third eye on your head, and just say some words backwards. You're fine.
Yeah, he did go out there and create an awesome alien universe. Especially the Mos Eisley Cantina scene with the whole scum of them. But when you talk about effects, can you imagine being back then at the very first scene with the little ship going and then just the giant ship just keeps going? That must have blown their mind.
And it's a fantastic first shot too, because it's right there at the beginning, and it tells you, all right, this is a story about scale.
Yeah.
This is a story about really big fancy ships and then much, much bigger things. And, you know, you may see something amazing, but it's just going to be off in the corner. That tiny ship is going to be dwarfed. That alien in the cantina, that's, you know, these beautifully done, you know, prosthetics and rubber masks, he sits in a corner and you see him for 5 seconds.
And people make entire stories about him, like Aura Singh and all these other ones, entire stories just past somebody in a corner. And that's all gone now.
Well, that's not all gone now. Those movies are still there.
Yeah.
And as he was saying, that fiction is still out there. You can get it. Hopefully it'll stay available for sale. Otherwise, there's going to be a fascinating set of dealers' rooms at upcoming conventions as far as like, psst, hey, boys, I got a little bit of
Empire. $2, come on. $2, quick, before they catch me.
Get your eBay stores ready.
Yes.
Well, the thing they said was and I think one of the things where they said they're killing the franchise, and you said something that was very interesting, which is they could just say, look, the events that revolve around this don't longer are canon, but we are going to take some of these really cool characters from this world, and we're going to cherry pick who we like.
Yeah.
Give you a hint on who.
Well, I mean, some of it also is they've got, what is it, over 30 years now, close to 40 years now of history with it that they can do that cherry picking with. One of the problems with TV shows as opposed to movies, in my opinion, is you've got to crank something out week after week after week. Some weeks you're tired. Some weeks you have no budget. Some weeks it's just not, it's going to be the episodes like, why do we have the animated series have pink aliens in them on Star Trek? I mean, sometimes you have that week. With movies, you don't do that. You are making one complete unit right there. And so that's why they're keeping the movies. But with the expanded universe, you've got the same drawbacks of 30 years of like, I don't know, we gave him a contract because Timothy Zahn was busy at the time. This is what he wrote.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to keep all of that.
The other thing is, didn't they announce there was also going to be like a Boba Fett movie, a Yoda movie? I mean, didn't they like
I
immediately
think it's going to be,
what
is it, like a movie a year for a while?
I believe Disney said that's their ultimate goal.
They're going to beat
It's
this
ambitious.
horse till it's dead.
I think they want to treat it like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like
yeah.
And to me, Marvel proved it can work. Why not? Let's see what they can do.
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Marvel fangirl, but I don't know if I have it in me to watch another Marvel movie till 2028 in that same universe where there's never going to be any progress or change.
Well, they make their progress and change, but like Iron Man 3, we talked about this last week, proved that it's done.
Yeah.
Move on to other ones. That's why they're starting to explore these other
I will bet you anything
heroes.
that they're going to reboot Iron Man within 5 years with a different actor.
We don't want to do that. So, you know, when we go back and we look at the original Star Wars movie and the impact that it had, I mean, it was just amazing, but, you know, it does hold up really, really well. Because you're right, the practical effects, I think, literally changed the game. But going back and touching on it a little cleaner, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem when you change the entire scene. The Jabba's singing, and they went from the puppets to that little screaming CGI character you saw down his mouth. That's what I have a problem with. And so why do you think George Lucas decided he wanted to keep going back and changing things?
Why did Steven Spielberg make 18 different versions of Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
But we only have one out there that just doesn't come back and keep changing.
No,
we could let the guest talk.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I think that's an instinct that pretty much every artist has, is to keep going back and tinkering. And the only difference between Lucas and really anyone else who produces that sort of work is that he had the money and the influence to be able to do that. There was, if someone publishes a novel and wants to go back and edit it 5 years later, it's usually not really an option. When you're George Lucas, you can do that, and one can argue whether or not that was ultimately to the benefit of the work, but I think very few people are in the position to face that dilemma at all.
Yeah.
Well, it is a weird dilemma because, I mean, some of it did need to be touched, like when Jabba's first approaching Han at the ship, and they did it wrong because he just walks around, so they just literally picked Han up and made him go like that over Jabba's tail. Why on earth would you do that? That makes no sense.
For the same reason that people get plastic surgery and don't realize that it makes them look hideous. Because, like the Michael Jackson effect of that, where you go in and you're touching one little thing and you're touching another little thing and you can't even see the big picture anymore. That's my theory, at least.
No, I think it is very difficult to retain perspective on something that you did 20 years ago and been kind of tinkering with ever since, right? It's hard to remember what worked, what didn't work, and what people care about and what they don't care about. You can see that niggling little flaw in there that really bothers you, and no one in the audience cares. But for you, it's this bête noire, and you want to get your hands back in, and oh, he's got to step over the tail this time, and suddenly my life and work is fulfilled again.
No,
have you had any instances like that in your work?
I have not had the opportunity. There are certainly things that I can look back on and go, yes, if I had the chance, I would go back and change that. And I think it's probably a good thing that I don't have that opportunity.
Now, one thing I would like to bring up with it is Star Wars, in addition to just making these iconic scenes, has also brought a whole subculture in with. You've got the 501st, you've got all the Star Wars conventions and whatnot, and I want to prove that I'm not just here out of hate, I want to shout a little love out to the 501st for those of you that are not as familiar. I'm sure that you are very familiar with the 501st.
I am. I've attended a number of events with the 501st in attendance as well, and they have always been fantastic. They're the kindest, most devoted people I've ever encountered in a fandom.
Now, what do you think draws people to the 501st to begin with? Because I've got a couple of different contradictory things going on in my head, and I'd love to hear it from someone else.
I'm really not sure. I mean, my sort of working theory is that it's a combination of passion for the subject matter, obviously, but I think it's also people with a real desire to do that sort of creative craft work and have an outlet for that. Yeah. And for them, it's an opportunity to go, well, I love Star Wars, and I love doing this work. This is an opportunity for me to be part of a group of people who's really dedicated to this material and really appreciates the fine detail, the craftsmanship, all of it.
And the practical skills that you can learn. Like if you are a geek and you want to learn cabinetry or anything to do with wood shop or for that matter metal shop, find a 501st Legion. You're going to learn about vacuum form machines as far as making your armor. You're going to learn how to build an actual TIE fighter. A group in town actually did that. It was beautiful.
It was really nice.
And yeah, so I feel that they are some of, and again, as you were saying, some of the nicest people you're going to meet. But it was recently brought up, we discussed this last week as well. Some people have been asking what are the best science fiction conventions to go to for the ladies. And I'm going to surprise people when I say I think that any place with a large 501st contingent is probably going to be a place where you're less likely to be harassed. Not because these guys are like, oh, we got to go protect us some women's or something like that. But
because we know they don't do that in the Star Wars universe.
But specifically because people that are involved in maker culture are less likely to be harassers to begin with. And so you've got a ton of people there that like to make things and are more likely to stand up and say, dude, cut it out. So you might have a lot more fun at a Star Wars convention than I've made it sound like.
You wrote for Of the Old Republic, because you have to say that right. You wrote for the Old Republic. How was it to go and say, okay, how do I write for a player that's been doing this, and I have to make sure this scene works? Because it's like player choices. Because there are many players who will always pick the jerk move, or always like, I'm going to 100% light side this one. So.
You know how hard that is to do? I have 100 dark side points on my light side character, and I didn't even want them. That's a hard choice to make.
But so how is it as a writer, writing for the Star Wars universe, but also writing for players who are like herding cats.
Sure. So for people who aren't familiar, the Old Republic has a branching narrative format. So you get to make choices as your player character. You get to be in that Darth Vader offers you the chance to go to the dark side. Are you actually going to do it? Are you going to fight the bad guys? All of that good stuff. So as a writer, working with that branching format, yes, there are quite a few challenges involved. The key solution to keep in mind is the player's own motivation. Players are going to be motivated by different things, but if you can sort of corral that set of motivations towards a certain point, so whatever I want to do, I want to defeat this guy. Maybe I want to defeat him because he's standing in the way to greater power. Maybe I want to defeat him because he's a genuinely bad guy and I'm a genuinely good guy. Maybe I need to defeat him because I know he's going to keep coming after me no matter what I do. But so long as you have some clear set of player motivations that are going to be moving generally in the same direction, then you can get that overall plot to work hopefully successfully.
It's interesting when you talk about the Old Republic because it takes place in a history that was created across 6 movies. So, yeah, I was about to say 9 movies because we're about to get another 3. What Star Wars did is they did create an entire backstory that we never saw. We were always wondering about the Clone Wars. We were always wondering about what it would be like. When you get to just approach that with an open canvas, how much fun was that?
Oh, it was enormous fun. I mean, basically, the 3.5 millennium difference in the timeline between the game and the films.
A couple things happened.
Yeah, a couple things happened, and what it let us do was it let us take everything that we loved and was exciting about the original movies, recontextualize it a bit, but still sort of be using those same themes and ideas and a lot of the look and feel of stuff, different but recognizable. Yeah. So we didn't ever want to get too far off course, right? Like, yes, in a sort of historical fashion, sure, the galaxy could have been a completely different place. Sure, there could have been, unrecognizable alien empires running everything, but that wouldn't have felt like Star Wars. So it was a opportunity to go crazy with the, constant reminder in my head, wait a minute, this needs to feel like the movies. This is a game for fans of Star Wars. This is not a game for people who love fake history and who use Star Wars as a starting point. I love fake history too, but that wasn't the remit, right?
So you said something interesting that I caught on, the original trilogy. Do you have something against the prequel trilogy like most other people out there do?
Are you trying to deny him a job? Of course he has to say it's all wonderful.
I think I actually meant to say the original movies, but it is true that the original trilogy is what people think of when they think of Star Wars.
Yes.
Now, whether or not that's right or fair or the merits between the two series, it doesn't matter. People still think of those first 3 movies as Star Wars.
They're very powerful movies compared to the prequel trilogy, but let's talk about those for a second. What do you think happened in the prequel trilogy that made people just... I mean, it almost killed the Star Wars franchise when Episode 1 came out.
I don't think it almost killed him.
I think it almost killed them.
I think toy sales kept it alive.
Oh yeah, the toy sales were crazy because the little kids bought Jar Jar Binks until they realized better.
Yeah, but see, that's the whole point. Like the Ewoks were brought out for the exact same purpose, was to just boost those toy sales and whatnot. So as long as the toy sales were doing good, they were going to get another movie.
But you have people who grew up with Star Wars, like all of us, who are like, yes, finally we get more Star Wars. Do you think we're going to be a little bit more hesitant going into 7 now that the prequels kind of burned us? I mean, I loved 3. 3 was really good, but 1 was bad.
I think you're certainly going to see a lot of hesitation on the part of people who were disappointed in that that prequel trilogy, right? There were a lot of people who were disappointed, and I think a lot of them are hesitant. I think
the excitement outweighs the hesitation.
I think so as well, and I think ultimately none of it's going to matter when the movies actually come out, right? The people who are interested in Star Wars, they're going to see the movie. The people who are not going to see Episode 7 are either just not interested in Star Wars or they're so burned by the franchise. But those are such a small group of people, and ultimately quality is going to win out. If Episode 7 comes out and it's a fantastic film, no one who is hesitant about it is going to not go see it.
I had a Star Wars fan try to explain to me once that you know you really love Star Wars when your entire conversation is explaining why, look, we understand. As far as like, yeah, but you just gotta love it anyway. Like, the real hardcore fans, they get everything that's wrong with it and can sit there and have an actual discussion with you about like, yeah, I'm sorry, that shouldn't have happened. Here's why I love it, though. And anybody's going to get kicked out of it with the whole, like, yep, there was this one thing, I'm done. There's other fandoms for them.
No, I think that's certainly true. And, you know, people who rage and, you know, post, 30,000-word critiques of this material on message boards, right, they do it because they love it. They're incredibly passionate about the work. And, you know, I've been on the receiving end of some of that stuff, right? Like, you know, The Old Republic wasn't universally loved by every single fan in the world.
Really?
Things rarely are. That sometimes comes as a surprise. You'd think everyone would go one way or the other, but...
Any death threats?
I never personally got any death threats. I'm not aware if the studio as a whole got any.
But some hardcore fans there.
Yes, so I would say that generally speaking, the long-form critiques come from a place of love. I'm not sure if the death threats do. That might be the exception to the rule, but for the most part, it's just nice to see people being enthusiastic about the subject matter.
Yeah, as you were saying, you have to really love something to put that much time and energy into it.
Exactly.
It's like a stalker.
Well, it's just like a lot of other ones, like Doctor Who fans and Star Trek. It's like, yeah, I know every about 5 years the Earth gets a new history in Doctor Who or in Star Trek. You can see the prop sets, or Kirk can't really act, and don't get him to start doing kung fu moves. It just looks bad. But at the same time, it's like, as I always tell people, you take the lumps with, you know...
You take the good with the bad.
I think that this is an area where Star Wars is going to actually get a Doctor Who advantage, where Doctor Who, man, the reboots happen, and everyone's like, okay, we're on board with the reboots, let's change everything. And this is going to be a chance to do a little bit of that. So maybe they can make it better and get rid of some of my hate spewing.
Okay, so why do you think there's not enough females in Star Wars?
Because it was started in the 70s and it's an old white boys club? I'm sorry, I should let you talk.
That's actually a fairly fair response. I mean, I think a lot of it is the template set up by those original movies. You know, whatever Lucas's reasons for setting it up at the time.
He's afraid of the uterus.
Sure.
Actually, I have a response to that, but go continue. I actually have the response, but go ahead and finish. I must.
All right. So I think once you have that template set up, it's very difficult to stray from it because there's such a single clear vision source material for Star Wars. It's very difficult to come along later on and either consciously or unconsciously go, all right, I'm going to make this very different. I'm going to make it much more diverse. First Star Wars movie is about a bunch of men rescuing a princess. And that's the template that's been set. So it takes a real mental effort and it takes a lot of concentration to go, all right, let's not default to these things, even though we love this movie, it works incredibly well.
See, I
let's
feel like
find a way
to tell additional stories. We've told that story once. We can tell some more stories that include more people.
Absolutely, but ultimately you also want to make it feel like Star Wars, and to make it feel like Star Wars while also making it diverse, it's a challenge. It's certainly something that all creators ought to be aspiring to do. It's a laudable goal, but I think in answer to your question, why is it this way? I think it is overly working to that template.
Pocky, you had something you want to add?
Yeah, you said it was because of some influences. It actually is. George Lucas and Spielberg, because Spielberg was actually tied with the original trilogy, like a lot of us actually know, because they worked together very well. It was because they were both fans of the old serials. They were fans of the Flash Gordons and the Buck Rogers and that. And they wanted to do was make a modern version of those, and the Arrow Flans and all that. I mean, if you look at the lightsaber sequences, if you took Obi-Wan and put him on a British naval ship, and you put Darth Vader in a Russian naval ship for some reason, it would still work. Well, yeah, but it would still work. And that's what Lucas and Spielberg were doing. They were just taking those old serials, those old Saturday afternoon matinee movies that they used to go see, and they just made those for their kids. And back then, yeah, one chick and she was the damsel. I mean, that was why there was a fake mini-series where they had the chick and her name was Damsel De-Stress.
I think that's actually a fantastic point, though. I mean, it just shows that line of influences, you know, whatever you start with as you go down the line, tearing yourself away from that requires a real conscious effort. And again, you know, we should be making that effort. But if you don't think about it, then that's, you know, you're going to be working from those templates from the 1920s and the 1930s that have been passed down to, you know, the serials of the 40s, and then you get to the 70s, and we're still working ultimately from those 1920s templates.
And I would say that just as the 30,000 word critiques that you get come out of a place of love, my critique also comes out of a place of love because I'm a second generation science fiction fan. I grew up with all of this, and TV has taught me that you can do better. Farscape had half the cast female and amazing puppets and everything going on. Battlestar Galactica, I mean, just things from the 21st century show that you can get a great viewership of both men and women and a little bit of diverse continuum, which, yes, I know, I love some continuum.
We talk about Continuum a lot because it is a good show.
Really good show.
I have a soft spot for Continuing. I'll confess.
And the point is that for some reason, with televised science fiction, we're getting more stories in there, more voices, et cetera, et cetera. But for some reason, with the movies, it seems like we're taking 2 or 3 steps back. And because Star Wars is such a giant cultural influencer within all of geek communities, that's why that critique coming out of that place of love and frustration, it's like, but you're the ones that are pushing the envelope, not pushing the envelope, you're the ones that are leading the herd, really.
It's an opportunity.
It really is.
Did you go in writing for the Old Republic and for the comics with like, I really want to make this female character, because the Jedi assistant you get is just so awesome, and part of me like, man, I really didn't want to fall in love with her as a character because it's like, kind of didn't want to go there, but at the same time it's like, I just want to love her and hold her and make sure she's safe because she's fun and I love her.
Sure, and yeah, when working on the Old Republic, on the comics, on all of that stuff, it is something that we try to be mindful of. You know, to make sure that, all right, you know, do we actually have a diverse cast? And it is something that we struggled against. You know, I look at the Old Republic now, and there are certainly places where I go, you know, oh, you know, I wish we had, you know, a stronger set of female characters in this particular part of the game. I think on the whole, we did a lot of good stuff. I think there are a lot of, you know, really great wide range of character types for men and women, but, you know, it is something that you have to work at. It's not something that is just going to naturally appear, as is any sort of good writing, right? Like it's something that if you want to do well, you need to put effort at it, and you're putting effort at 1,000 other things. But yes, I mean, we certainly thought about it. We had long discussions about racial casting in terms of, all right, you know, hey, here are our major characters. A lot of our initial writing on the Old Republic was done race blind, right? Like we wrote this material, we did not have any particular race in mind for the characters, and then we sort of came in at the end and went, oh, I guess we need to figure this out and figure out how to balance this out and, you know, how to actually have a diverse community. And suddenly all the questions of, oh, you know, all right, so how do we do this? Do we have, you know, too many, you know, white people in this section? Did we just accidentally make all of our villains minorities because they're all like the big important characters? So we were thinking, oh, we'll make them diverse, and then realized what message we were saying.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, and you know, I think we did a lot of good work there, but there's always more to be done.
You also did. I'm sorry. I was going to say you also did a great job with the expansion where you could finally get a same-sex partner. That was awesome. As a member of the LGBT community, that was awesome. The Hun planet where you could actually finally get a same-sex partner was great.
And that was something that obviously, you know, we would have rather have had all that material in the game to begin with, but it was certainly something that, you know, was work to be remedied. I know the team, they're now. I'm no longer actively working on the game, except now and then. But the team currently on the job, you know, is very dedicated to getting in LGBT romances, and that's fantastic, right? Like, you weren't seeing that at all in Star Wars before the Old Republic came along, except in the sort of the smallest kind of...
The real fan fiction world.
Yeah.
So we have about 4 minutes left. We got to get wrapped up. So last question from Chris-Rachael.
Oh, all right. I'm going to go, instead of following up on that, I'm going to go with something positive. What was your favorite, between both the comics and the video games, what were some of your favorite scenes to write?
Favorite scenes to write. So on the game itself, so we had a team of over a dozen writers, so I can't take credit for really most of what's in the game. But I was a writer for the Imperial Agent storyline throughout. That was really a thrill to work on because you had that, yes, it's Star Wars, but it's also sort of Black Ops spy fiction within the Star Wars world, which is enough to sort of you've got a lot of room to experiment there, right? It's a different kind of story, but it's still a Star Wars story. So that's probably the favorite of the Star Wars work that I've done.
So my last question for you is, why can we not make a Jawa Jedi? I really wanted Jawa to be a class so I could be a Jawa Jedi as much as possible. I have a party Jawa, but I want a Jawa Jedi. Why are there no Jawa Jedis?
Well, I don't really have a good answer for that. I can give you a technical reason. All the camera angles in the game are set for a human height player character. So
put him on a hoverboard, a hover chair, something. I want a Jawa Jedi.
See, if someone had just told us to put it on a hoverboard, 6 years ago, it would be in there by now. But alas, that did not occur to us.
So what do you have coming up?
Well, I've got a bit of more Star Wars The Old Republic work coming up. I did a bit of freelance work for BioWare. I'm not sure when that's going to be showing up in-game. I've got some other Star Wars work coming up that I can't quite talk about.
No, you can tell us these cameras are not on.
We know nothing.
It's just between you, me, and everyone watching the show.
All 6 of them. I mean...
But yes, and I'm continuing to do work in the video game world, so you can...
Do you have any other projects that you can actually talk about? I understand about NDAs, don't worry.
I have a number of projects going on, and none of them I can actively talk about right now. So.
I don't do anything. I sit at home and stare at a screen all day. Really.
Pretty much. That's the only proof that I have.
So if they want to keep up with you and you're like, hey, I get to announce something finally. Yay, thank you. Where can they find you?
They can find me at alexanderfreed.com.
Wow, you have your own website and everything, all your art up there, your stories, your little secrets that you like to not tell people. Like, here you go, I wrote this. Did you like this? It almost wasn't, because I enjoy the operative storyline.
I've got a little of that, and I've got a lot of discussion about writing and writing video games as well.
Cool. Do you find it hard to write video games?
Yes. It's as hard as writing anything, and it's one of those media that everyone's still learning how to do it right. So on the one hand, it's an incredibly exciting time to be a video game writer. On the other hand, you're never quite sure if what you're doing is working and if it should work, and if 10 years from now everyone's going to realize that was a terrible way to write a game. But that's what makes it exciting.
And it's also a very collaborative atmosphere, so isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the writer is one small part of a incredibly large, creative machine, right? You've got designers, you've got artists, you've got programmers, all of whom are contributing their own elements to the mix. And that makes it an incredibly rewarding experience because you're going to see, an outcome that you never could have made on your own.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. We've got about a minute left. We want to say goodbye to everyone, and thank you so much for coming and talking Star Wars with us, because it was really fun to have another Star Wars lover here. It's about on par with me.
He has to stand next to me every week.
Well, thank you for having me here.
And Old Republic is amazing. I'm just going to say that flat out again. It is an amazing game. You can find us on the Jedi Covenant server, Pocky. Come play with us.
I will jump on the minute I get a computer that is working. That is something coming up in the future.